Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back into another edition of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Massucci, and today we got another edition of the show. Today it's just me. We're going to be talking about some senior day sleepers. I was thinking about fantasy football and I was thinking about some sleepers that I'll be looking at for my dynasty leagues. So I dug in on the research. I tried to figure it out. I listened to a couple podcasts. I read a couple articles and I figured out some of the sleepers that I just wanted to talk about. You guys know I'm a college football junkie. So just kind of looking at these guys that I recognized in college and be like, hey, here's a couple guys I'm really interested in. Do I think they're going to end up being good? I give you my opinions on kind of what I think. So without further ado, I'm going to cue the music. All right, let's get right into it. Let's talk about these Senior Bowl prospect thoughts. So, I was clicking through the Senior Bowl trying to figure out, okay, let's figure out some sleepers to figure out who I should add to my dynasty fantasy team. And I figured I'd share with you guys, talk about it a little bit, try to help you out in your fantasy leagues, especially because I feel like I need help in my fantasy leagues because I've been struggling a little bit. So, two guys have stood out to me fantasy wise. Let's first talk about Malachi Fields. Okay. He was a stud receiver on Notre Dame last year, and was kind of their main receiver throughout the whole year. Notre Dame, again, really got going near the end of the season. They ended up winning their last 10 games. And then, of course, you had the craziness of them not making the playoff, right? He was at Virginia his first 4 years and then was able to get the fifth year and play at Notre Dame. His numbers don't wow you. He was 36 receptions, 630 yards, 5 touchdowns. And you're kind of thinking, okay, Jake, why should I really get excited about him? Well, let me talk about him a little bit. Through Senior Bowl, I listened to Todd McShay. He talks about it a lot, but he was seen as one of the best overall performers at the Senior Bowl amongst receivers. And it's mostly because of his size. Okay. He was measured in at 6'4, 205, and he uses his size really well. He's known as kind of like one of those physical receivers that'll go up for one on one balls and go right over you. And he had a great quarterback and able to make that happen in Carr. Carr was able to give him some nice balls down the field, and he was able to have a couple touchdowns. 5 touchdowns is pretty good. Um, it didn't fully project like what his NFL potential could be because he wasn't used as like the main guy. Notre Dame had a lot of other options to use, but a lot of people think like his main thing is going to be the mismatches in the red zone. And that's something that's exciting. I mean, you think about physical receivers in the past, like Kelvin Johnson and guys like that. Those are the main names that you think about. Will Malachi Fields be that? I don't know, but he's a type of guy that will get you touchdowns. And in fantasy football, that's 100% just huge. And if you're kind of looking at him and trying to project him a little bit, he's going to be a really good possession receiver. So a lot of quarterbacks will be looking for him on third downs because of that big body. And you saw a lot with Indiana. They throw those back shoulder balls to get people there. Like he'd be a great back shoulder target and he'd be a great one-on-one target for red zone opportunities. And then red zone target, of course, at the next level. Those are kind of the main things you're looking at with him. McShay also talked about how he stayed engaged throughout the week and continued like stacking like really good reps. And I mean, it's a long process, that Senior Bowl thing. So a lot of people can get disengaged and some people show up for a couple days within that thing. So a lot of scouts like McShay will um, talk about like you're automatically like being consistent. You're always doing the right things. You're staying poised no matter what as the days go on. And that's something I've noticed within like trying to evaluate basketball prospects that important to me too, because it's like if you're showing up every day and you're staying the same consistency and you're constantly like trying to get better and doing the reps the right way, that matters 100%. Those are all green flags for me with Malachi Fields. I really like what he could be, and he's definitely a guy that's going to go in the later rounds in the NFL draft where I'm like, okay, he's a guy I got my eyes on. We'll see what team he lands on and if he would be a good fit for my fantasy football team next year as a sleeper. So I wrote down another sleeper for fantasy football, and that would be Mike Washington Jr. Okay, so he was the running back at Arkansas last year. And he was kind of all over the place before that. He was 3 years at Buffalo, and then he transferred to New Mexico State. And New Mexico State, he was kind of the main back. In Buffalo, he had spurts of being the main back as well. But in Arkansas, he was really able to light it up and looked really good near the end of the year. He ended with 167 carries, 1,070 yards. That's 6 yards a carry, which is crazy, and then 8 touchdowns. That yards per carry number is something that I tend to look for with running backs, especially like when you're playing at the SEC level. If you're even over like 4.5 yards per carry, I'm like, man, like this guy's a stud. And he really showed it throughout last year. He's 6'2, 223. He's really like a physical downhill runner, great power back that just goes right through you. And especially in the NFL, like you think of a guy like David Montgomery, where it's like, okay, Detroit's trying to give it to him so he can score the touchdown, right? NFL teams just love those physical downhill runners that are able to get them touchdowns when they're stopped at the 1 yard line. And Mike Washington here could be fantastic for that. He runs through defenders and creates yardage after contact, which is huge. And he also is fast. He had a couple runs where he had like home run speed and went right down the field and was able to score. Like he can get off his feet if he gets off a couple blocks, and then he's able to take it down to the end zone. So that's something that's 100% you got to look out for. He's dangerous in that end. He can receive the ball. He's got some receiving ability as well. On the year with Arkansas, he had 28 receptions for 226 yards. That's something to keep an eye on for him. And he flashed some lateral quickness and lighter feet within the Senior Bowl. He's someone that's versatile, and he's someone that can play as a power back and also use speed when needed. And those are running backs where it's just like, okay, this is a guy to keep an eye on. And especially when I'm looking at running backs, if they can succeed at an SEC level or a Big Ten level, then I'm kind of all in on them, because they're types of guys that have already succeeded at the tops of college football. And now you're walking into an NFL program where it's like, okay, it's just as hard. It's harder in the NFL, but they're prepared because they've played the highest amount of competition within college football to be ready for that stuff. So he's 100% a guy I'm looking out for. I feel like you'd like to see the touchdown numbers be a little higher if you're looking at running backs from that. But he's a guy that no one's going to be talking about. That'll probably end up being like a third, fourth, even fifth round pick. But he's a guy I'm definitely going to keep my eyes on where he lands as well. Okay, there's a couple quarterbacks I want to mention that were in the Senior Bowl that I was really interested in. These quarterbacks, were guys that at the beginning of the year we were trying to project and we'd be on high on. They were guys where I was just like, like he could have a 100% a ginormous year. And the guy that really like sticks out that you were thinking, oh, he's going to have a monster year is Garrett Nussmeyer, right? And it was a really disappointing year. He ended up the year injured, and he was returning from injury in the Senior Bowl. So definitely something to look out for. He was at LSU for 5 years here. He came off an unbelievable junior or senior year, whatever you want to call it, where he had 4,000 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He's coming into the year looking like the clear number one overall pick, right? And then it really kind of down spiraled for him. LSU, everything fell off the rails. Kelly gets fired. Everything just was not working for LSU. Really sad for Nussmeyer. And Nussmeyer, he didn't really help himself on the year this year. He only played in a lot less games, but he was 1,927 passing yards compared to the 4,000 the year before, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It just wasn't a year that I think everybody was imagining for him, 100%. But throughout Senior Bowl, he looked pretty good. He kind of looked like the clear top quarterback over the final 2 days. of the practices. He's always had great field vision and instincts. He's a coach's kid, so he's very smart. He's able to get things in the right spots. One of the things you saw at LSU that made it so tough for him throughout the year was his line was not really great, so it sped up his reads. And once his reads got sped up, it really just ruined his confidence. You could tell with him 100%. It really made it tough. But like his instincts and field vision make him a really legitimate prospect within this class. And he's definitely something I got my eyes on there. Again, he was returning from the injury. And it's like you could see there was some compensation with the injury and like how he was moving. His movements have been like he looked a lot slower this year compared to when I watched him like the year before. And that was something that really confused me, especially when I was watching college football earlier in the year, right? It was just something that confused me and something I kind of took notes of, right? But throughout Senior Bowl, again, he showed improved rhythm and mechanics during practices. Things just seemed a little bit faster. It seems like he's recovered a little bit more from the injuries. He's probably going to be a second round pick. And I would suggest, and he definitely needs it. He needs time to develop. He needs to be in an NFL film room. He needs to figure that stuff out. He needs to make reads quicker because he's not the most athletic type of quarterback. He's not the kind of guy where it's like, oh, it's Aaron Rodgers, it's Patrick Mahomes. Go get him out of the pocket. He's going to go make a play. No, that's not his game. It's very structured, very pocket oriented, very quick read type thing. And that doesn't really make me high on where I think he'll be an absolute stud within the NFL right away. Like I think he's a guy that he's going to need time. He's going to be a fantastic backup quarterback because he can kind of speak the quarterback language and get the starting quarterback ready to go for these games. And he's the kind of guy that can come in for one or two drives and you're okay. Will he be like a backup that I completely trust? Not right away. Maybe in his fifth year. But I really don't have much hope for Nussmeyer ending up being a stud quarterback, like ending up even being a starting quarterback. I just think, especially now with how the game has moved, you need to be a little more mobile. And I don't think he has that in him. Do I think he can end up being a really good backup quarterback that I trust? Yes. But I do feel like even that is going to take a little bit of time for him. Okay. Let's talk about a quarterback that I really liked and thought looked pretty good in Senior Bowl, and that's Luke Altmyer. He's been interesting. He started his career at Ole Miss and then transferred to Illinois and started at Illinois for 3 years. First year, not good. It took him some time. He was trying to get going, right? And then his next 2 years, he did a lot better. The thing that really stands out to me is the touchdown to interception ratio. That first year that I talked about, it's not very good. He was 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. It transformed to 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, then 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I think, and funny enough, it was like the game that I really locked in on, but I think the worst game I saw him play was Indiana. Indiana torched him throughout the game, and he just threw a ton of interceptions to start. That game kind of showed me like, okay, Indiana's like the best team. I didn't completely think that right after that game. I think I needed a little more time, but it made me believe that they could beat a team like Oregon and they could do what they did, you know? But getting back to Altmyer, like some of the things that are impressive for him is he's really good in the red zone. Like he finishes drives when he's able to get in there. He's got quick reads and he's got a really strong understanding for coverages. And he just doesn't really risk the ball that much. Those interception totals being that low is a good thing. I've also talked about in the past, and I do truly believe this. Sometimes that's not a good thing. You got to be able to throw the ball down the field. Like I think Jalen Hurts not throwing interceptions was actually like a bad thing for him. Like there's times where you need to get it down the field and you need to be able to make a play downfield to get your team back in the game. But Altmyer's smart about it. He doesn't force risky throws. If it's necessary, he'll be able to do it. He's got smart throwaways to avoid negative plays. Those are things I kind of look out for where it's like, okay, like this was needed. You saw it with the Broncos game. Stidham throwing that terrible ball, trying to force something down the field. That's something even backup quarterbacks need to have, because you might be thrown into one of these playoff games if you get drafted by a really good team. So that's something to watch out for. I think Altmyer does a really good job of that. He's got a lot of late game wins. He was really good at that with Illinois. Like, Illinois' record with him, they just won games. They won games flat out. The last two games, they really figured it out and were able to win games. You can knock on the schedule, you can knock on the team a little bit, but they were able to figure it out and get some stuff done. And that I respect. They weren't able to win against like tough competition, but Altmyer was a guy where I was just like, okay, he can do things out of the pocket and make plays that are super impressive. Like, I was super impressed with his game against USC. It was an unbelievable game. I was rooting for USC in that game. Malachi Lemon had an unbelievable game. Maui Noah was awesome at quarterback, and Altmyer just continued to respond and respond and respond, and they were able to win that game. And it was because of the responses by Altmyer. It's something I'm really impressed by. But I think the thing that makes me like Altmyer the most is the mobility. I talked about it with Nussmeyer. The thing that I'm concerned about is that he's not really mobile enough. Altmyer is someone that can really run the ball, and it's impressive. In college, they do knock you for sacks. So, like, your yardages will be a little bit screwed up if you're sacked a lot. And especially in his last year, his O line was not really good, but he's still sitting at over 200 yards all 3 years he was at Illinois starting, rushing. And he would have games where he was just able to use his legs and really make it difficult for teams. He had about 5 rushing touchdowns last year, which was really impressive. I think he's going to be a really reliable NFL backup quarterback right away. And I think he's got the tools to kind of turn into one of those average quarterbacks in the league. I do. I think he's able to process really well. He's fast. He can get out of the pocket. He's the type of guy that I think is just eager to learn and eager to make plays off of that. Luke Altmyer is definitely a guy I'm watching and a guy I'm circling. I told you about those 2 fantasy guys that I'm looking at in dynasty leagues. Altmyer is another guy where I'm going to circle, because I think right now he would be a really good backup quarterback, or a pretty good backup quarterback. And he's the type of guy where I think has starter potential, whereas a guy like Nussmeyer, and we're going to talk about Taylor Green next, I'm not so sure of. Okay, Taylor Green. So he was at Arkansas, another Arkansas guy last year, and he had some unbelievable games, man. Like, he's just a really, really fun quarterback. Look at the interceptions are always the thing that's really bothered me about him. He threw 9 interceptions first year, 11 interceptions second year. It's bad. Like, there'll be games where Arkansas is playing teams super close. They had so many close games throughout the year last year. And then Taylor Green just really couldn't finish it. He just couldn't finish it. He'd throw a pick near the end of the game or something like that to make me think, ugh, this is rough. But I also think he didn't really have much help. Their O-line wasn't that good. He didn't really have many weapons on the outside. He had Mike Washington, but I just don't think it was enough to really sustain, like, hey, this team should win in the SEC. So talking about him a little bit, he's big, mobile, toolsy quarterback. Again, he can really get out of the pocket, and he's really fast and mobile. That's something that makes him interesting. And that's something that makes all 3 of these quarterbacks interesting, which is why I picked these 3, because they're so different. Altmyer can kind of do both. Taylor Green does one, which is mobile well. And then Nussmeyer's more of the pocket, like hitting the guy on the numbers type guy and making quick decisions. The red zone reps highlighted slower processing for him. That's what McShay really brought up. And, like, with him, it's kind of been that way. You could tell, like, some of the throws he'd make and some of the interceptions that would happen for him was just, they were bad interceptions. They weren't great reads, So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. The thing I did like that McShay mentioned was that, like, he was eager to learn and eager to, like, try to get better throughout the camp. He was one of those guys like Malachi Fields that was really trying to take every rep seriously and trying to take the coaching and all that stuff. So I really do think that helps him if you're looking at him as a developmental project. but it's something that I'm concerned of long term. Could he be a solid backup quarterback? Yeah, probably. Do I ever see him starting in the NFL? No, I don't. A really good quarterback at Arkansas. It's just kind of sucks for him that he didn't really have a great team around him and didn't really have a great coach around him either. Okay, last guy, I wanted to mention him just briefly, but Derek Moore, I got to bring in a Michigan guy on this podcast. He was at Michigan 4 years, led them in sacks last year, 10 sacks. He's just a really tough edge. He competed throughout the whole weekend. McShay and Mensch were like super impressed with him. And of course, he's a Michigan guy. Moore has really made some great plays throughout his Michigan career and has been one of those staples on that defensive line. He's viewed as one of the most consistent edge performers. Um, and it's something that I really think is just huge to have as a depth piece, right? So if you're looking at later rounds and you're looking at a defensive guy, I think Derek Moore is definitely a type of guy to keep your eyes on because I think he could end up being a really good edge to add to a depth lineup within the NFL system. All right. That is going to wrap up the show for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, wherever you're at. Go like, subscribe on YouTube, and hit that follow button on Spotify. Give us those 5 stars. It does really help out the channel. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.